Noon. I'd like to call the workshop to order. The time is 12:45, and the date is November 13th, 2023. I wish to welcome you to the Superintendent's Workshop being held in the Joanne Idlett Jr. TEC. I ask that out of respect to everyone, please silence all electronic devices. And also, if you have any material with you that you wish to share with any board member, please give it to our Executive Assistant, Ms. Morey. We will take a break every 2 hours if needed before that. At this time, I'd like to recognize the superintendent to explain the purpose of the workshop.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Today is the opportunity to present items that will be presented for board consideration and approval in future meetings. The first item on the agenda is the discussion regarding developing a direct support organization. As you know, we've had conversations going back 3 or 4 years. Do we start our own foundation or do we not? The decision was made years ago that we would pause on creating our own. After being in the walk for going on 4 years, now is the opportunity to create our own foundation. We did go out and seek an individual who can help us in the creation, or help this board in the creation of this direct support organization. We were blessed to find Ms. Janet Knupp. Ms. Janet Knupp has firsthand experience in creating a direct support organization in Chicago Public Schools. When she did this, it was the 3rd largest school system in the nation. Now it's the 4th because Miami is the 3rd. No offense, Janet. But to this day, it's one of the nation's most successful foundations, and we have a very comprehensive strategic plan that is approved by this board. And the intent of this direct support organization is to provide additional funding so we can enhance the work of this school system aligned to your district's strategic plan. Ms. Knupp will provide a presentation and be more than happy to answer any questions board members may have. Janet?
Chair, good afternoon. I'm just going to quickly talk through the Articles of Incorporation and followed by the bylaws for our new DSO. The Articles of Incorporation, it's a 5-page document, but primarily the content is on the first 2 pages. Most of the language is very consistent with any language you would have in forming a not-for-profit 501c3. Name, that you have no financial benefit to board members, that you have limited liability, and you have a registered agent. The item specific to the DSO that may be helpful for you to note is the purposes, which are to operate exclusively for educational purposes and formed as a direct service organization. And again, the purposes formed to enhance education opportunities and excellence. And then under powers, one thing to note, it's organized exclusively to receive and make expenditures for the benefit of Indian River County K-12 ed, adult career, and continuing ed. The rest of it is, as I said before, very specific language, very traditional to forming any 501c3 nonprofit. Are there questions on the Articles of Incorporation, or I keep going?
Board members, anybody have a question on that?
Yeah.
Okay. Ms. Rosario, you're recognized
I have several questions, actually.
Okay.
on that part. Okay.
I'm sorry?
On the articles?
Yes.
Okay.
So one of the things that I wanted to ask, let me get my notes here. 2.2 on the first page, where it states, it is formed to enhance educational opportunities and educational excellence in the school district and so on. That entire part is not the same as what's on the bylaws, so shouldn't they reflect the same thing?
That language was drafted by council, and it's thematically the same, so I suppose we could change it, but I defer to council to advise that.
Yeah, I actually like 2.2 better than what is on the actual bylaws. I mean, I just appreciate the wording because it's focused on students. So it actually ends with, it is to enhance and enrich educational programs and opportunities for students in the school district of Indian River County. It's slightly different on the actual bylaws, the 2 and 3, which is our vision and our mission, which we haven't gotten there yet. But I do like 2.2 a little better.
Okay.
I just think they should reflect the same thing.
Would you like to weigh in?
Through the chair, either is fine as the statute consistent, but frankly, to have the exact same language probably is going to be the clearest way to do it. And that's certainly not a big problem. Either one of them would certainly meet Chapter 617, would meet the 501c3 requirements. And I think, if I remember correctly, I think the language in the bylaws was fleshed out a little by staff because it was more consistent with what they saw as historically what the mission statements had been for the district as a whole. But I stand ready to do the bidding of the board. The board, after all, has to approve the original articles.
Yeah, so if I may just follow up and then open it up to board members. The purpose in the bylaws just seems very focused on the statute, which, by the way, I think the number is wrong. It's written in the bylaws as 1001.543. I believe it's 534, or 453, I think it is. Yeah, it's 453, so the numbers are just flipped a little bit instead of 543. I don't know who's taking notes on that. But the statute, so the purpose in the bylaws just seems, it doesn't have anything regarding students. It doesn't have anything regarding the benefiting of our resources to enhance our educational programs here and our opportunities. So if we could keep the purpose that is in the articles and just use that as the purpose in the bylaws, I'd be happy. If that makes sense. I'm not talking about the vision and the mission, just the purpose. Use the same purpose. Do we engage in more conversation about
Well,
it before I move on?
Mr. Ansbacher, would you like to respond, or are you good?
Well, the micro first, I had already noted the typo in the bylaws, but if we're going to be revising, I repeat, either one meets the statute.
Okay.
So it's up to y'all.
Board members, you okay with that change? Okay. Go ahead,
Okay,
Ms.
and
Rosari.
then- Thank you. And the next question is on page 2. Let's see. So Article 5, limitation of liability. And what I've read, and it's not just in this section, but I just put my notes in this section. So a lot of the writing in these, obviously, it addresses the board and the board members. And so as a board, I immediately go to board as in the board members, school board members, not the corporation or the foundation board members. So wherever there is a board member in these documents, can we just clarify which board members we're addressing? So I know, I mean, in theory, I understand that this is the foundation paperwork, essentially, this is gonna be the foundation bylaws and the foundation articles of incorporation, but it does say the articles of incorporation of the school district of Indian River County Education Foundation. So I think we need to clarify where it says board, that it's not assumed to be board members. These documents are going to outlive all of us, unless they are amended, assuming that the foundation continues. And so if we get it right the first time to identify which board we're just talking about, I think that that's important. So I don't know who would address, I don't know.
Do you understand what she's pointing out? Okay.
And through the chair, because we've already in the previous article mentioned the foundation's board members, I just continue to say board member, but frankly, again, I agree we have an entity that is authorized by and operating to benefit the district, which is run by the board. I have no problem with making that clarification. clarification. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And one thing I'd like to say, normally when I see like legalese, and that's what they do, is that they make a statement at the beginning saying what they're referring to, and then later on to make it easier to type. But I do think she's making a good point in this fact, that is a board and school board. So for this document, I think it'd be important.
It is our introduction to the entity. I agree. It's a clarifying point.
Okay.
It's good.
Mr. Rosario?
Yes, and then, let me make sure I know where I see it. So in the statute, what is in statute is written in both of these documents where it states that the foundation should be organized to benefit public K through 12 education, adult center or adult and career, and community education programs in Indian River County. So here's where I struggle. So we have a community education foundation, which I understand they are in the process of disbanding. Those two, apart from what we are looking to do, they serve as a real community-based education foundation where their funds that they received could have gone to local communities and other organizations, nonprofits, and so on and so forth. They had their own separate board. They could do that. Here, if we are creating our own education foundation as a school district, I understand that these parameters in statute are, it's like a continuum. You could use the funds raised for K through 12 education, adult career, and or community education programs. But I don't want us to receive funds and then we're bringing those funds out into the community and supporting other nonprofits or other community-based organizations. That's what I don't want. So I don't want us to be able, so if we could remove community education programs, I'd be fine with that. I don't want us to be like another CSAC. I don't want our foundation to be considered of that kind of sort. Dr. Moore, I know we talked about this.
Dr. Moore, would you like to be recognized?
Through the chair, I couldn't agree anymore, so I would ask staff and our attorney to look at the language to ensure our sole purpose is to support the students. We're not going to be distributing funds for wraparound services to be conducted, nor do we want to apply for money from CSAC itself. So create language that simply says, this organization is not doing that work. We're specifically interested in raising funds to support the district's strategic plan. We're not going to recreate the process of CSAC, nor are we going to participate in requesting funds from CSAC or any other public entity.
Can I interject?
taxing entity.
Can I interject one question on that? When we're referring to community, though, are we including, was the thought to include charter schools?
Because this is yes, we would include charter
Okay,
schools.
so I don't want to not include them. So that would still be part of this?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Barefoot.
A question. Would the language you just used, would it prohibit us from partnering with another not-for-profit focused on children? In other words, if there was an initiative, could we jointly go out and raise money for that initiative? Or if another organization was out and we decided that they needed a little more support and it was specifically consistent with educating kids, could we contribute? Could this foundation contribute to whatever that initiative was?
So, through the chair, I want to keep it very, very, very clean. And the fact of the reality is we partner with pretty much every community-based organization as the public school system, whether it's training on how to provide interventions or services or providing access to these things. That's the work that we're already doing. We specifically went and found Janet for a very intentional reason, which is to raise funds at a state and national level looking at different organizations and not-for-profits that we can leverage those funds. This is not yet another foundation in our community. It is a foundation where we can be very strategic in looking at the largest employer in our county and identifying resources across the state and the nation to provide additional funding so we can meet everything within our district strategic plan. And Janet, do you want to add to that? Or?
Through the chair, I would just note that I think the language about the statute and our intent is very specific to what the statute reads, so I don't think we wrote that statute, but it's just consistent with what the statute says for some of these things of our obligations as our foundation. There's absolutely nothing to prohibit us from working in partnership with other organizations, but we don't have specific language in there saying that we would raise money with them, and I agree with Dr. Moore that it's probably safer.
No, I wasn't, your answer is sufficient.
Okay.
We could partner with them
Yes.
if it was in our best interest, but we're not raising money specifically for that organization. There's an initiative which is in our, that we, let's say the other organization wasn't doing it, we would do it anyway. If somebody else joins us or we join them, and it's consistent with our mission and statute, we're good with that. I just don't want to see us be so narrowly focused that we miss the opportunity to create leverage in an initiative that really is for the benefit of kids.
Ms. Bearberg.
Yes, Dr. Jones.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry. point
I'm
of
sorry,
order.
well, yeah, is it on the item that?
Our attorney's hand has been up for a while.
I'm sorry.
I'll wait for
Okay.
Dr. Jones.
Dr. Jones,
Okay.
is it on the article, so, on what she was talking about?
Generally, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Ms. Knupp, this, this is our first time with doing this with Education Foundation, and you have done this before. What can you tell us about what will be a challenge as we move into this? What do we need to look out for? Any pitfalls?
Thank you for asking, through the chair, thank you for asking that. I think the largest pitfalls you would have is not being really clear about what your purpose and mission is and what you're trying to accomplish. Some of the language within here is the intent of which is to benefit our public schools. Another pitfall you'd have is if you have, quote, mission creep, which I know Superintendent Moore has been very specific that we not have, and I share that belief strongly. The accomplishments of the highest functioning direct service organizations throughout the state of Florida and nationwide are ones that have direct alignment with the school board strategic plan. And when you start deviating from that for multiple purposes, that is a pitfall to watch for.
And I think I asked Dr. Moore about this. We bring a little bit of money, but are we going to have goals, with fundraising or anything like that? I mean, I know we've been talking about this for a while.
Through the chair, and we have to get established and organized, and we'll come back to the board with our plan, very similar to the plan that I brought when I first came in here in terms of what we're going to do within the first 100 days. We'll have very aggressive goals for ourselves, and we think we're going to really help, move the system forward.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Mr. Ansbacher.
Just very quickly. Both as a 501c3 and as a DSO, and I've represented DSOs for a couple of decades, the statute is both the 501c3 and 453 are very narrow in one sense. We can cooperate with other entities, but the funds that we actually raise and the activities that we participate in are supposed to focus on our students. And to the extent that it starts dealing with what is called in 501c3 language, unrelated business income, or in terms of the DSO, other educational purposes, the farther we go afield, the farther we risk our DSO status. So I think it is but it sounds as though everybody is narrowing the focus, and to that end, I think we should be fine.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Rosario.
Thank you for that. So this is good. So I came back to, in the Articles 2.4, where it stated, and community education programs. I'm just requesting that be deleted, community education programs. so that we avoid what we've just been talking about, right? The impression that we are going to use any funds that we've raised to provide to any other community organizations or community education programs. I do believe that our partnerships with local education programs is critical, and that we continue that partnership in so many different ways. But with regard to funds, I believe that we need to be very clear that these funds are not to be, shared with the general public versus used within our district, including charter schools. And we did not, I didn't see that anywhere here. I think at some point we're going to need to include a statement that says including charter schools, all public schools including charters, just to be clear on that. Something that I just wanted to make sure, and so some key points, Mr. Ansbacher, and I'm not so sure who would make these changes, so I'm just going to throw them out there. Some key points, I think Dr. Moore mentioned it just before about not being another CSAC. When I mentioned that, he said he's not interested in requesting CSAC funds or being because it would be a 501c3. It technically could request funds from CSAC, and in this case, we are opting not to do that. I think he is absolutely right in that. I would 100% support language that says exactly that. The intention is to never request CSAC funds, or however way you want to write it. Dr. Moore sits on the board on CSAC, and he is ex officio, on this foundation that we are intending to begin. And so the optics of him being on both boards and then also requesting fund, the optics just don't look good. Some might argue that it is not double dipping and asking, for tax, asking our community for extra funds in their taxes to be given back to. I just don't want to go there. I don't want to, ruffle any feathers and make anything more complicated than it really needs to. So if we can make language somewhere in there that's specific to that. I also wanted to just double check on the partnerships and the beginning. If we can add language in there, no NGOs or no quid pro quo with donations. So if a donation comes in and it's tied to I'll give you this money if you implement this program, or if you implement this curriculum, or if you advertise for my something. Whenever there is a tie to the funds, I would just rather not do it. With new legislation and, new changes and parental rights and all of that, I want us to be clear that any funds that someone is offering to give us to benefit our students would be at the sole discretion of the district and how the district chooses to use it to benefit our students and our teachers. And if there is, let's say there's a computer program, if there is a computer program that happens to be a good thing, just saying, we all approve, we all think it's a great, then we can take it a step further and look into that. But I don't want us to sign on the dotted line that we will absolutely do something that some other NGO is requiring us to do if they donate money. Does that kind of make sense?
Okay, Mr. Barefoot?
Dr. Moore? Oh,
Oh, do you want to respond? Yeah, go ahead.
No, through the chair, 100%, yeah.
good.
We will be 100% above water. Anything this board does will bring honor and glory to the school board itself.
Okay, Mr. Barefoot?
I just want to make sure when you say that, basically,
Yeah.
donations are coming for a specific purpose. These are restricted funds. Let's differentiate between restricted and unrestricted. So when you accept restricted funds, you know exactly what the purpose of those funds are. And if someone wants to name, something after somebody in honor of Mr. Fagan's service here, even though he's leaving us in the lurch a bit, that's a decision that the board of the foundation should make.
No, and not to cut you off, but we have very specific policies around naming rights.
Okay.
And this, the DSO doesn't own or have the ability to make decisions with your property, and ultimately we must adhere to the policies which ultimately govern the school system.
Well, it's also, could be program-related. It could be, it could be
Can
to
you talk into the
support,
mic?
it could be to support,
Your mic.
oh, sorry. It could be to support,
No, the other way. Up and bring it towards you. Yeah, but they want it towards you.
all right. It could be support, let's say, a training program to train, help train, I don't know, pick something, teachers that are teaching. The district's adopted a new math curriculum, let's say, just for an example, after going all the vetting, and it requires training third and fourth grade teachers. Specific fundraising to request a specific use. As long as we have that flexibility, the board of the foundation is going to decide, should decide, whether you accept that donation based on the criteria. Let's not pigeonhole ourselves with language that's so precise that it takes away the ability of the board to make a judgment. That's my point.
Okay, would you like to respond?
Through the chair, the words like never and always worry me in bylaws and articles of incorporation, so I try to stay away from them. With receiving money that is for a specific purpose, if we have a strategic objective and we are in direct alignment with the school board, a high-functioning DSO would actually seek dollars to support that initiative versus sit back and wait for opportunities to come to them. Therefore, you might go to the Gates Foundation and say, we're doing this initiative, would you consider being an investor? And then you co-construct a proposal where they're saying, we are, I think to Mr. Barefoot's point, doing this for improved literacy or science education. It is highly consistent with what high-functioning organizations do, and I can't think of an example of a large national foundation that would just give money without having it have some purpose written in their grant. But it's always going to be consistent with the school boards anyway. So.
Well, my point was your point. Never say never.
Right.
Because you just don't know. And while this board may understand the context in which this is being, the next board may not, and you don't
Right.
want to create a problem for
That's
yourself.
right.
Dr. Jones?
Dr. Moore or Ms. Knupp, on 2.4, under the Articles of Incorporation, it says for the benefit of public K-12. Are we excluding pre-K?
No, I'm sorry.
Through the chair, it was not our intent to.
No.
I believe, and I defer to council, that it was language specifically, again, to statutes that were put in there. But
Well, I
defer.
just want, we're trying to be specific in everything, and obviously, this will come back to us with the edited version and recommendations, but I would like to specifically have that in there.
This,
Hold on one second, Mr. Rosario. Okay, so you're saying in the writing of this, not, I know it's in statute, but in the writing of this, you want it? Okay. Mr. Rosario?
no, I was just going to clarify, in the statute actually says K through 12, that the direct support organization funds is specific for K through 12. I don't know, and this would be a legal question, I don't know if we can add pre-K to it, but it does say K through 12.
Mr. Ansbacher, can you answer that now, or do you need more time to research that?
We're going a little in over here, we're expanding a little over here. What I would like to do, frankly, is talk with DOR, Department of Revenue Council, and because it's really more of making sure that it complies with both the educational statute as well as the taxing statutes. But I should have an answer for that within a couple days.
One reason why I think we make a good point about, and even though I want to include pre-K and everything, Pre-K isn't available to every single student, whereas kindergarten is. So that leaves out a segment of the population. So I just want to make that statement. Even though I know pre-K is important and we need pre-K and we get funding for pre-K different ways, that's my only concern.
Here's just a for what it's worth. And in the for what it's worth category, I tend to try to be a strict constructionalist. That said, you can have what's called a non-statutory DSO, and it still qualifies in terms of fundraising and in terms of being a 501c3. If it turns out that as a policy you all want to move in or move out slightly, and the price is we have a non-statutory DSO, I would have to look at what the potential implications are from fundraising and such. But that's fairly quick, and the fact is it's a very common thing. For example, booster organizations, PTA, PTO, a lot of them are non-statutory DSOs that are for the direct benefit of the school system. So, I would recommend that we try to stay on the straight and narrow, but if as a policy you all wanted to go slightly outside of the norm, that's our worst case. And then as long as I can come back and tell you, here's what the fundraising implications are from a legal standpoint, we're bringing this back once this is a final document anyway. I'll have an answer before then.
And I think, let me add one thing to hers. With the pre-K thing, Dr. Moore, could you find out if other organizations around the state are including pre-K or not? Maybe you know.
Yes. Through the chair, yes. The actual language on purpose of the one says pre-kindergarten through 12th, I believe that is in the statute. Again, I would defer to counsel on whether that exact wording is in there.
Okay, yes. Dr. Jones.
Just, thank you. I don't want to do anything that we shouldn't be doing, but if we're really aligning this to our strategic plan, we know how important it is for our pre-K students to get ready for kindergarten and then achieve that goal of 90% literacy. I certainly don't want to do anything that is not appropriate, but if we're really trying to tie this to what we do as a school board, I think it's important. But thank you for checking.
Okay. Ms. Rosario?
Yeah, I had an idea, Mr. Ansbacher. I don't know if, I would prefer to stay, to stick with your recommendation, to keep this as close to statute as possible. But would it be possible to include just a paragraph or a section that states something along the lines of included in this would be a non-statutory DSO exemption allowing pre-K to be included within the scope of the work of the school district moving forward. So basically just like instead of an entire DSO, non-statutory DSO to be written for just pre-K, can we just include it as like, an exclusionary paragraph or something, or an exceptional paragraph, you know what I mean?
It's a good idea. I don't think we can stay within the statute, though, by doing it. And again, it's because of, as I said, when you're within the statute, we are, and I'm not going to give you the two examples, but there are two examples where there was really good fundraising opportunity for DSOs, and they were specifically told by the Florida Attorney General, you can't do that and stay within the statute because the statute is that narrow. That said, look, I'm either going to be able to find out that we can raise enough as a non-statutory or not, and I won't be shocked if the answer is, yeah, you can. And then it becomes a policy decision, and we should have that answer promptly.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Through the chair, it is my experience that if we aren't statutory, it will impact fundraising, whether just by the intent of it. So even if it doesn't formally say from a donor, I won't do this, I think to Mr. Zaria's point, the more that it stays statutory, the better it is for all donors.
I agree. Thank you.
Agree.
Okay. Mr.
Okay,
Rosario?
so my last point on the Articles of Incorporation, the last paragraph on page 3, under the dissolution of the foundation. So it's actually Article 6, distribution of assets on dissolution. Dissolution, sorry. Upon dissolution of the foundation, the Board of Directors shall, after paying or making provision for the payment of all liabilities, distribute all remaining assets of the foundation to the School District of Indian River County, period. Everything else there, I think, should be removed. I do not believe that if we are raising money and then the foundation is dissolved, that the monies that we raised would be given to another 501c3 or given to an outside organization or given to a community group or something like that. Any funds that we raise should stay within the district. So my recommendation is to put a period after Indian River County and remove everything else after that.
Okay, any other board members want to respond?
What page was that, Ms. Rosario?
Page 3, last paragraph,
Oh, I thought it was page 8.
page 3 on the articles.
Okay. I skipped ahead. Got it.
Well, one more, last.
Hold on one second.
Yeah.
I think it needs to also be adjusted on page 8 of the other bylaws.
Yeah, so
Okay,
you'll do a crosswalk.
yep.
Through the chair, assuming it meets legal requirements, absolutely, and thank you for raising that. That is wholly our intent that it would go
Okay.
for that, so thank you.
Anyone else?
Thank you.
You good, Doc?
Good.
Okay, Mr. Rosario.
Thank you. And the last thing that on the articles I was going to bring up, and I'd like legal counsel to chime in on this. I see that Mr. Ansbacher is the incorporator for this, the articles of incorporation. But moving forward, I believe we would need a separate or someone else to be the attorney. Would that be a conflict of interest for you to remain the school board attorney and the attorney for the nonprofit foundation? What do you recommend, sir?
I've seen both, and I honestly believe, because we as a board are creating the DSO, there's no conflict at this point. There is unlikely to be conflicts going forward, but given that you're talking about money and you're talking about fiduciary responsibilities and audit reviews by this board, and once they're up and running, it is always my recommendation that the DSO have its own separate counsel.
Okay, thank you.
Would that be counsel that the DSO funds? Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Frankly, once it's up and running, I think that there is almost a blanket prohibition on funding from this board to the statutory DSO. So it would have to be theirs once it's up and running.
So you would be okay, I mean, guess legally to get it started, to help get it started, and then eventually, we wouldn't have any conflicts there. Okay,
Once it's out of the nest, it's its own entity.
okay.
It's flying on its own.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
we did the articles, now we'll do the bylaws, and for the sake of time, any conversations that we discussed that change within the articles, we'll have to go back and align it within the bylaws, so there's a number of things.
Your microphone.
Oh,
Sorry.
just in this initial conversation, where we're going to have to align the bylaws to the conversation we just had regarding the article. So, Jen, if you want to present the bylaws, or we can answer any questions, whatever the flavor of the day is.
Through the chair, thank you for flagging that. I agreed prior conversation that we would use similar language, exact same language, I should say, for articles to the bylaws regarding what we're organized for and to include things like charter, absolutely agree. So taking into all that feedback. So on the bylaws, there's, again, much of it is legalese, but I'll point out things where you might have questions or want clarification. So again, here, little line, purpose to be akin to what we write in our articles. We included a vision and mission statement for the very reason, I didn't realize Dr. Jones would ask this, but it actually is to avoid the pitfall that the organization becomes something that was never intended by this founding board. So that is different, but it was extremely deliberate to put that in there. On Article 5, Board of Directors is worth us really spending a minute just being sure that everybody is akin to this. Again, this is based on best practices. So I'll talk quickly. The number, and we can go up to 15 directors, again, giving us that option. You can always change it later. And that we can start with 3. The ex officio, the superintendent, and 1 school board member. That's designated annually. The superintendent always. Terms staggered. And then there's 2 key requirements and 1 provision. Requirement that people on the board, directors, make a financial contribution and that they participate in orientation and evaluation. Again, that's just consistent with best practices. It is not necessarily legally required, but it is best practice. And a provision that you may establish a associate membership. Again, the word may, giving the board and the school board opportunities to consider whether that is appropriate or not. But it's good to have associate boards for fundraising purposes. On to officers, typical officers, chair, vice chair, secretary, treasurer. If the initial board only has 3 directors for the initial period of time, someone will have 2 offices, chairman, probably secretary and treasurer simultaneously. I included a section on the executive director, again, to be extremely clear about the purpose of this role for a long-term sustainability and consistency with the vision this organization, this board of directors has. Committees is standard language, and again, if we only start with 3, obviously you're going to just have an executive committee, but then it leaves us plenty of room to add traditional committees like development and or finance. Those were the primary items.
Board members, Ms. Rosario?
Thank you. So I'm going to stick with the first page for a second here, under the purpose. And I know that we talked about moving or using the purpose that is currently written in the articles for the bylaws. But just to point out in the purpose that's already in here, it does say pre-K through 12th. And I think once we get language, we just want to make sure that whatever we say moving forward aligns. Then there is also community education programs, so we want to make sure that we remove community education programs. That's also in the first paragraph or in the purpose.
I think the superintendent made a comment saying that they are going to make sure that whatever
Yes, I know, I'm
we
just
want to do in
mentioning,
the articles,
thank you so
we're gonna
much
do
for
in the
that.
bylaws.
Number 2 and number 3, which is vision and mission. So when I was reading the vision and the mission, what I see here in the vision and the mission is like a general, we're creating a foundation for fundraising for our school district. But what I don't see is an alignment with the strategic plan or language used in our strategic plan. And so I'd like our vision and our mission to match our district's vision and mission. That we're going to fundraise for the transformation of education or, whatever our vision and our mission is written in the strategic plan. I'd like it to be student-centered as opposed to fundraising-centered, if that makes any sense. And that's my opinion. I have other questions. Board members want to chime in on that?
Anyone else?
Okay. Can I continue?
Mr. Barefoot, go ahead.
Just a comment, again, you can make language so precise that you make it difficult, if not eliminate, the flexibility that you really need from a practical standpoint. So, you know this, but let's not be so precise that in the process, we have to come back and amend the bylaws to accommodate something that language is too precise prevents you from doing. That would be my only comment.
Through the chair. Agree by doing that. Let's just say we were to get a huge state appropriation for a teaching and learning center, and it wasn't in our strategic plan. It would not be consistent with your strategic plan at that point. So we would just want the spirit of what you're saying, but I'll defer to council on how we can write that. So the spirit of what you're saying is absolutely adhered to. But if there was a new priority that the school board wanted us to pursue, and it wasn't in the existing school board, strategic plan, I wouldn't want it to limit us, as Mr. Barefoot was saying.
Well, then why are we doing, so then why would we do that? The whole point is to align with our strategic plan, to move forward the goals of the strategic plan. And so the goals of the district is to transform education for every student, to impact them academically, socially, and so on and so forth. So it should mirror, the goals that we have. And the goals that we have are pretty generic anyway. They're pretty, global, essentially.
And they could probably fit under there, I think what she's saying, Mr. Barefoot.
I just want to be sure again. It's fine to thinking of what our strategic plan today is. The next superintendent, the next school board may have different ways of describing their vision. The world's changing almost by the day. And again, keep these words generic. I've been on foundation boards, I've been in situations where you think you're covering all the bases, and then you regret after the fact that you've removed the flexibility. You got to go through hoops again to adjust, whether it's bylaws or articles of incorporation. So I think the point is well made, but words matter. And just make sure the words don't in any way hinder us for a future board, whether it's the foundation board and/or the school district.
Yes. go
And
ahead.
through the chair, just to point out that you can also address some of these things in your board policies once the organization starts, if that helps to have some of that additional language.
Yeah, I just want to bring up one thing before you continue, Mr. Rosario. So you brought up, there was one point in here where you said that about voting on the board member. So you brought up that we have a board member that sits on this.
Right.
So is there a recommendation from you or from Dr. Moore on when this board votes on this person? Because I'd like to kind of throw it out there that it needs to be in the reorg meeting next year, but this year, when are you looking at us looking at voting this in and also voting on the board member?
Through the chair, after we receive feedback today, we'll circle back with Ms. Knupp and legal counsel and figure out when we can get to this for approval. When we bring it for approval, we'll have a separate item for the board, just as you did, to acknowledge, to vote, make a recommendation and vote one person in. And then from that point forward, it will be part of the organizational meeting.
Okay. Mr. Rosario?
Yeah, the dates are in here. If you look in the bylaws on page 6, it says the fiscal year will begin July 1st. Are you confused?
Well,
That's not what I was referring to, though.
Well, it does say that if the fiscal year is July 1st until June 30th, that whomever takes that position would actually begin in July, not now. So to
Right.
vote someone in now for then, would we have to, so I'm adding to the conversation, if we were to vote for someone now, would we then have to vote for a new person come July 1st?
No.
Well, I'm not asking, I agree with you.
Yeah.
But moving forward, when you take a look at the dates, make sure that you include that in there, whatever your recommendation is.
Did we not vote on the Value Adjustment Board? They meet once a year, right? And so we vote on who that person is. They attend one time a year, and it's within the year. So I think it would be apropos to do it in the reorg meeting. My question was, when I looked at that date of it starting July 1st, so the question is, when is it that we're going to be voting on this for this person? Because I would imagine that person would need some information before July 1st. Okay. Yes, go ahead.
Are you done, Ms. Rosario?
Mr. Ansbecker.
All righty.
To-
Mr.
to-
Ansbacher.
Very quickly through the chair. I changed the language because it is a potential conflict in terms of the language to just say that a member of the school board of the Indian River County to be designated once per year, so that you all are not bound by the fiscal year of the DSO.
Good.
And just for what it's worth in terms of the time, there would be general approval of the concept of the formative documents by you all, followed by the initial formative meeting of the DSO. The DSO would bring the filled-in proposed articles and bylaws and proposed board members back to you for final approval, because under two of the three criteria, you have to form and you have to approve the directors.
Okay. Dr. Jones.
I keep going back to what Mr. Barefoot is saying. I think I've been in situations with policies and bylaws and everything, one word change, you could be in trouble. So I hope we can keep it generic. I think there's going to be a good check and balance with the board there, this board, the superintendent, and, aligning it. Janet, just one question. I thought about this when you talked about it. 3 board members, is that enough to start? I mean, in your experience, is that the way to go, and why?
Through the chair, 2 reasons primarily. One, we're anxious to get started, but we also want to be very deliberate
Okay.
about the board that we found with.
Okay.
And in my experience, you start with a small group with the deliberate intention that within 6 months, you're adding X amount of members, but that you're starting with clear alignment on that. So I would anticipate within the first 6 to 9 months, that number would go to another odd number, 5 or 7.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I would assume that they'd have to do the structures and the backbones before they add more people in to the conversation. And then they would want those other people to
Right.
come in because they want that other, not marketing, people that can go into the community and help raise funds and things like that. Mr. Barefoot.
Yeah, this is, we're fortunate enough to live in a very philanthropic community. I'm sure that's, besides Dr. Moore's good looks and personality, that was one of the things that you perused. Certainly, it's one of the reasons Cleveland Clinic wanted to come to Indian River County, because of the support they felt they could get. Because we have so many philanthropic people involved in all sorts of not-for-profits, the challenge is going to be, there's going to be, Adam Smith or Mary Jones. I'll pick another Jones. How about
That's right.
Mary Leonard, just to pick a name? I think that it's going to be interesting to challenge, because someone could be on the board of you name it, the crossover mission that you want on this board. I trust that does not become an issue, that someone sits on boards that are also focused on children, but perhaps somebody that's on the Boys and Girls Club board, somebody that we ought to be partnering with, quote-unquote partner, and actually having the perspective of those board members that serve on those other not-for-profit servicing children in a very variety of ways adds value, frankly, to our board or to the foundation board as they're contemplating, what they're soliciting for, how you present your grant requests, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I trust that and maybe this is for Sid, we're not going to be restricted in any way in recruiting people to this board that really can be value added because of their service on other boards and focused on aspects in the community that are consistent with our mission, values, whatever words you want to use.
Through the chair, as I looked at 20 other education foundations throughout the state of Florida, many of them, if not all board members, because they are philanthropic leaders and community leaders, serve on multiple boards. I agree that having that perspective just allows us to be in even greater alignment with our school board and our school district.
Okay, anyone else? Mr. Rosario?
Oh, are we still on a particular topic, or
I don't
can
think so.
ask
I think
another
we moved on.
Okay. So let me come back to, I'm on page 2, section 3, term of service. Directors will be elected for 1, 2, and 3-year terms. So which is it? Do we choose, or who gets to decide that for the directors?
Do you want to answer?
For the chair, from a strategic point of view, we would make a recommendation to stagger them. You wouldn't want all your board members to be on 3-year terms and then to leave automatically. It's just, I've never served on a board or had a board that I reported to that didn't have staggered terms for that reason.
And I get that, but we have a board today. Who gets to determine who's going to begin a staggering 1-year, 2-year, or 3-year? That's, at some point, where are the rules that will be created to guide the board in this direction?
Through the chair, the initial board of directors would make recommendations regarding further directors and their terms to the school board.
Will that be written? Would that be captured in writing, or is that just going to be a verbal agreement?
Through the board, I believe, but I will defer to council that it's in there about that you approve all of our board nominations.
Yeah, we approve the nominations of the people, but not the terms. So my question is, where will this be? Will this be in writing? Again, I'm thinking long-term. After we are no longer board members moving forward, how do these board of directors function without guidelines as to what to do next, what to do? Is there a manual?
Yeah,
Will
go ahead.
there be a manual? You know, I know we're in the first stages, but.
Per the chair, and Grantmakers for Education and Harvard Business School actually wrote case studies on the Chicago Public Education Fund, just to say, and you want to have your board of directors have the ability and that organization to say, oh my goodness, we can get X person on our board, but he or she does not want 3 years, but they're giving us X million dollars. It just gives the organization the opportunity to be extremely strategic in their fundraising, and I've found it to be highly successful.
So can we add here, as determined or as agreed by the collective of the board, of the foundation board?
I think
Has to be something moving
Mr. Barefoot
forward.
wants to chime in. Go ahead.
Most boards, all boards have a nominating process. You offer people, somebody resigns early from their term that they were selected for, and you will appoint, Mary Smith to fill the 1 year, and then you'll re-nominate that person for a 3-year term, let's say. But that responsibility lies with the board of the foundation, and within the structure that evolves over time, you'll have a nominating committee. Maybe not initially, but if you had 10 people on that board, there's gonna be a governance committee / nominating committee, besides audit and all the other typical functional roles. That's standard practice. And I think within the framework of the board's ability to create committees as needed, that will automatically evolve without necessarily, you could say at some point you'll have a nominating committee, at some point you could say you're gonna have a governance committee. Part of the responsibility of which will be to opine on nominate for 1 year, 2 year, 3 years. Depends on the need of the board at the point in time and the desires of the person you're asking.
I appreciate that. So how about directors will be elected for 1, 2, and 3-year terms as per the nominating committee?
Yes, go ahead.
Again, I will defer to council if I'm wrong, but It has in here that we will add committees as necessary. And again, worrying about restrictive language, you might call it a governance committee. You might call it, initially, you might only have a finance committee, and the executive committee is making those decisions if you only have 5 members. In the early stages of an organization, and continue to be concerned about very prescriptive language that can narrow us from being strategic. But certainly,
Well,
with
then-
respect to honoring your intent.
No, you can remove committee and just say as per nominations. The whole idea is that somebody has to decide who is going to be 1, 2, and 3 years. So if it's based on nominations, then just add nominations in there.
Yeah, can we ask the attorney to chime in?
I'll be real quick. The original format was a typical format. It was that it would be initially 1, 2, and 3, and then 3 years. Ms. Knupp asked to change to the more flexible. What I think we can do in order to give that flexibility is I suggest that we have a presumption of 3 years unless the board after, and I'll explain the nominating process in a second, it's not terribly complex, that if the board determines that it is in the best interest of the organization to get someone who will only be available for 1 or 2 years, that they can, based on the best, the needs of the organization, allow someone to be 1 or 2. And that way, it becomes an exception based on circumstances as opposed to trying to figure out who's going to be 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, I like to just add that I'd like it to be more flexible because I served on a couple other boards that, one very similar to this in St. Lucie County. And there were people that only wanted to do a year, but their impact was big. So I think we need to be very flexible in this because we don't want to turn anybody away that is a potential really positive for this board. So I think keep it as it is, be flexible as long as the language is okay legally.
I think that we could, in fact, we could do as simple as 1, 2, or 3 as agreed to by the board at the request of the applicant, provided that at no time will it cause us not to have the minimum number of board members under statute, which under the nonprofit is 3, and that's one of the reasons we chose 3 to start with.
Okay.
And the nomination, by the way, at this point, in response to Mr. Barefoot, it is through the executive committee, but again, that can change at any time. At this point, we just have an executive committee because that is made up of the corporate officers. And as we develop, if there's going to be more depth in the DSO, they can come up with whatever committees at that point they choose to.
Okay. Ms. Rosario?
Thank you. Let me see. The meeting authority, it states the chairman, I'm still on page 2, the chairman or in his or her absence, the vice chairman, secretary, treasurer, or in the absence of any such officer, a director chosen by a majority of the directors present shall preside at each meeting. Shouldn't the language be where it says chosen by a majority of the directors present? Is it based on the majority of the directors, or is it based on the majority of all of the members present?
The directors are the board.
But then you have other people. You have directors, and then there are members and officers.
Well, we have members, it can be a membership organization, and officers are going to be chair, vice chair, secretary, and treasurer. So really, however it works, and the reality is people are going to be absent. I think one thing that would make it a little cleaner as well is in the following order: vice chair, secretary, or treasurer. If you're missing every one of your officers,
Yeah.
you're probably not going to have a meeting.
So it's basic, it's just the majority of the voting officers essentially?
Sure.
Is that right?
Sure.
Okay.
That'll work.
It just seemed a little ambiguous. I'm on the next page. I don't know who determines Section 12, the reimbursement of reasonable expenses incurred. So if there is a reimbursement, it may be authorized. Who determines that? How does that get determined? Just out of,
And as a general principle, that would be done by the ED or the treasurer. And frankly, if you want to have belt and suspenders, just as we have belt and suspenders for checks over a certain point, we can say approved by both the treasurer and the ED.
okay. Are there, but so otherwise there's no like guidelines for that, right?
Well, the problem is what's reasonable
Yeah.
depends on the circumstances. And I think as a general principle, where you go wrong with a nonprofit is where you have no guidelines and one person choosing. I'm happy to give a little more specificity. It's no big deal.
Okay.
Yes, Ms. Cano?
Just related to that point, through the chair, the language is taken directly from other DSOs that are high functioning in the state of Florida, with the idea that if there was a conference that was coming up and they were asked to come along, that you could reimburse them for it, and that you would put policies regarding these kinds of reimbursement in your policies, not in your bylaws. And that tends to be the more appropriate place to have those things, so that you're not, again, limiting our language so much from what you're trying to do. But it was primarily to allow people to be able to participate if they did not have the means as a board member, and/or just appropriately if they're participating on behalf of the foundation.
Okay, Ms. Rosario?
Section 13, this is just, I just think that fundraising is repeated, and I don't know if that's an error. The first sentence reads, directors shall be responsible for direct and active participation in fundraising activities, which shall include a personal contribution, company commitment, in-kind contributions, and/or fundraising. So I think we've got fundraising in there twice. I don't think that last fundraising is
If I may,
needed.
through the chair.
Yes.
Or does it matter?
It's, the fundraising activities is the full set. The subsets are personal contribution, company commitment, and then in-kind contributions and fundraising, which would
Okay.
mean, obviously, either providing something in kind or getting something from a third party in fundraising. So it's a subset. I understand how it might appear to
That's fine.
be redundant.
Thank you for the clarification. That's fine.
Ms. Rosario?
Thank you. Number 17. Let me see. Board members, the board, again, we'll clarify which board, right? The board may establish non-voting associate memberships in the foundation for individuals or representatives who contribute to the activities and the goals of the foundation. So far, we have 15, the goal is to have 15 board members. How many associate members? How many members, and officers? So where do we put a cap on how many people are involved? And maybe that's what I'm not understanding.
The officers are members of the governing board. The executive director is the official employee and executive director, executive
Janet.
officer. The associate members, the core issue, and I would defer to Janet on one point, but as you know, for nonprofit, there are the 3 T's: time, talent, tithe. And while we are seeking fundraising, there may be people who can provide talent and time, but not tithe. And that's where providing a voice from someone from the community who may not have the funds is typically where you might have an associate member. And I would defer to Ms. Knupp as to how she sees that operating.
For the chair, if it is a fundraising organization, the associate membership was largely intended to facilitate fundraising, and that those members might be up-and-coming professionals that their parents may want them to start getting involved in fundraising activities and part of an organization. But if we want this to be a fundraising board, and we are sure it's in alignment with the school board strategic plan, the associate members are intended to be people that might throw an event or a gala and/or begin to invest in the foundation, with the idea that as they age, they might take their fathers and brothers or sisters or, some kind of legacy role.
Are associate members voted on, or are they just nominated? Like, who determines that? If I'm a director, do I get to decide I want these 5 people to be associate members, or is it based on their volunteering to do a particular fundraiser, for example? And then we just give them that title of associate member?
Yeah, for the chair, you would certainly have guidelines of how you were thinking about this associate board. It is hard to anticipate what those would be, since we don't know if we would even have a gala. So if you had a gala, you might say you're the associate board for the gala. Again, they're non-voting members, and their activities, as well as their intent, should be to support fundraising.
Okay.
All right.
A lot of the questions is more for me to understand what the expectations are, so I appreciate that.
Anything else?
Yes. All right, so we clarified the officers. That was my next question. Can you just, well, I'll leave that question for later. Let's see. So on page 5, with regard to the budget, I see the budget is there. There's the section 9 on the treasurer. The statute actually states, let me pull this back up. The statute actually provides in section 2B, the rules shall provide for budget and audit review and oversight by the district school board and the department. That part is not included in these bylaws. So I'd like to add that in to the bylaws.
Happy to do so. I think we put in the policy, and I'll just track the policy. And for what it's worth, the audit is required under subsection 4 for more than $250 in expenditures or expenses. And what we did, and Janet, I don't recall what we used as a threshold. It was either 100 or 100. Thank you, Dr. Jacobs. That what I chose to do, because 100 is still a substantial amount of expenses and expenditures, we came up with, for less than the statutory audit, and the audit is a significant expenditure and a significant ask, but less than that, to do what would be called reviewed financials, which is basically just below the audit, but also would require an auditor to look at it or a CPA to look at it. So just, and I'm happy to include that within the bylaws. That is within your enabling policy already.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Rosario? Anything else?
Yes. Okay, we talked about the executive committee. There is an indication here that I'm on page 6, that the executive committee may be conducted by phone, provided that public notice is given. So if public notice is given and they are run by Robert's rules, are they subject to the sunshine?
It would be a sunshine board, and I've just deleted it. It's easier just to say we'll handle it by sunshine, period.
So everything is handled by sunshine, or just the executive committee?
No, ma'am. Any time that you're going to have 2 or more members who are acting on behalf of this entity, it will be a sunshine meeting. It is a 286 sunshine meeting. And trust me, that's generally the single biggest, not in terms of the biggest issue, but it is the one issue that is raised the most when you're dealing with DSOs. No, you can't meet there. Yes, you have to have notice in the usual places.
Okay, I'm glad to clarify that, because I didn't read anywhere here that it is subject to sunshine. And I did not see that in the recommended policy either. So I'd appreciate it if we could
Okay.
be clear about that.
Yes, Ms. Knopf?
For the chair, that language was specifically taken from other DSOs, but of course I will defer to council with the idea that if somebody was sick, that they would be able to participate, again, an executive committee member, and so especially in the beginning when there's only 3 directors, that you would be able to have a meeting by phone. But it certainly will defer to Mr. Ossenberger's what the legal compliance is, but the intent was that if something had to happen, we didn't have to always be in person, because there may be a board member that spends 4 months up north and would not be coming down. So that was why we added it.
Okay, the one thing I will say, that last sentence says, "A majority of the members of the executive committee physically present shall constitute a quorum thereof." So you have to have a physical quorum when you're
I
talking
agree.
about sunshine in Florida.
Yeah.
So they can't do that when they have 3 members, because they have to physically be present for their first meetings. Okay. Ms. Rosario?
No, I agree. I think certainly Mr. Ansbacher, taking a look at that previous sentence, executive committee business may be conducted by phone. That just seems generic. I know that you agree. I see your head shaking. I trust that he will edit, revise, change, do whatever needs to be possible to ensure that we don't allow some language that would cause a problem with the sunshine. What does this mean? I'm in section 2 of the same page. What does it mean, the chairman shall appoint the members and designate the chair of standing and other committees? What does that mean?
If we have other committees, the chair will select who the members will be, as well as the chair. This only standing committee we have right now is the executive committee. In my experience, and I know, for example, I am confident every one of you has been on a number of boards before. My experience is you start with what you think you're actually going to have, and what I have found is talking about amending bylaws, I'll come in and there'll be 5 and 6 committees, and almost none of them will ever meet. It might be an executive committee or such. And I think starting small and building out is probably sensible. And frankly, we can come back and say, the officers, the executive committee will select, or the board will. And my primary issue isn't how it's nominated, this is just purely placeholder. My primary issue was simply that there be an executive committee that gets started and we build from there. And we may never have another committee.
Yeah, so what it sounds like to me is that even though we're going to start where we are, once everyone is kind of settled and in their position, that you will facilitate policy making within the DSO. And that's what I think is part of some of the questions that I have, like how is that going to happen? But I understand that's going to be within the policy making of the, now, does that policy making happen within the DSO and their board, or does that, or is it called policy making? I see you're thinking. Is it
No,
called
it's
policy making or just
It's both.
rule? Okay.
It's both levels. The policy making of what the overall purposes are, because it's a subordinate organization to this board. The major policies and directions will be coming from this board.
Okay.
But then the subordinate policies, basically where do we want to direct the fundraising to go. But I think ultimately, that board is going to determine how to fundraise, and if, for example, there are dedicated funds, you know, where they can get the best bang for the buck. Both boards are going to have a substantial policy analysis.
Okay. All right, that sounds good. Section 3 of the same page, page 6. It says all notices shall be mailed, electronically mailed. The first mailed, did you assume that that was, or am I assuming that's postmark mailed? Like
Snail mail.
snail mail?
But I
Stamp
think that
mail?
it's a good place to, again, because I think here belt and suspenders is helpful to put in a sunshine notice language there as well.
Okay. Awesome. So we talked about the fiscal year already. Number 6 on page 7, on audit and review. It states the foundation shall make provisions for an annual post-audit or review. Do we need post in there? Shouldn't it just be audit? Because you're doing an audit on your finances that you've already, so it's assumed to be post, right?
Well,
Does it matter?
there is a reason, because the language has been moved around among numerous people. The point was a meeting to address post-audit or post-review by the independent auditor. So I'll put it into the English language as best I can, but that was what my intent was originally.
Oh, I thought I heard.
Mr.
something.
Barefoot?
I mean, to that point, I chair 2 audit committees. There's always a post-audit review. The auditors come in, they do the review, and then the entire board receives feedback on what that review is, and there may be deficiencies, there may be suggestions, recommendations. That's the way any organization operates.
Okay. All right. Page 8, section 7, amendments to the bylaws. The amendments here do not indicate who actually approves the amendments. It actually says that the entire board, but it doesn't say which board approves amendments to the bylaws. And it really should be this board that approves, no?
No.
We're approving
No.
it now.
No, it's the DSO. What you're doing is you're creating the entity, and then your control post the origin under the statute is you get to continue to approve directors, and per the statute, the audit comes back to you every year for
Right.
post-audit analysis and meeting, as well as post-reviewed financials for anything between 100 and 250. Again, because you have the superintendent and you have the ex officio board member, if there is a concern of a runaway board, the super and the ex officio board member can bring back and say, I fear the potential of a runaway because of X, and ultimately because it is a component part of this board. There are protections, but as long as they are going along in the ordinary course consistent with their fiduciary duty, those sorts of things are going to be up to them.
So they handle their own amendments to the bylaws, essentially.
But if, for example, you see that they would be doing something that is inconsistent with the enabling policy or the statute, you do have various remedies available.
But it's just not written here.
It's not written here because this is really for their internal.
Very general, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So the other thing that I was going to ask is, should we add in there, with regard to amendments, something to the effect of provided, the amendments must always follow statute and board policy, or something like that?
Sure.
Something to the effect of, we're not going to cross over and violate law or our current policies.
And bear in mind, I have drafted an MOU to work between the two boards, and I think that would be something that we would be fleshing out at such time as we have a board to come back to you with. And that would be where you would be getting some of that liaison work. It's not just left to the individual. There will be a structure in that MOU.
Okay, thank you. And then the last thing, of course, is with the dissolution, so I know that we already talked
Go on.
about crosswalking those. I do have a question with regard to the policy, 9215. I have a couple, actually. So the policy that we approved for public hearing at our last meeting, it's 9215, it's that direct support organization. It's the one that Dr. Moore sent to our email just before the meeting today. In reading it, now that we're going to make all these changes, in reading the policy is currently written very, again, generic, very based on statute, but not specific to how we are not going to use our funds for community education programs. We're going to strike that from our bylaws and our articles of incorporation, but it's still captured in the policy itself. So do we pull this policy and align all of these together to ensure that our board policy will also mirror the articles of incorporation and the bylaws?
Dr. Moore, want to take that one?
As we establish the DSO, I think there will be opportunities to update and align this specific policy, but this kind of serves as a jumping off point. It gets us started and established. And as Janet begins this actual work, there may be opportunities to align policy as we actually begin to do the work. But I would recommend passing this policy and then circling back as we do every year with policies.
Well, it might actually be a blessing in disguise because I went on our posted, our website where we have our policies for public hearing, and this policy is not on there, even though it's supposed to be. I searched high and low. I went through every single one. It's just not there. So I know that we approved it. I'm hoping that I missed it. If it's not posted, we would have to repost it for 30 days. If it's not there, this would be the blessing in disguise where if it's not posted, just edit it now. We'd still have to wait for it to come back to us for December.
Dr. J is checking that, and if it has to get renoticed, it gets renoticed. If it is part of the package, as I said, the easiest way in the interim to deal with it is through the MOU. And, we could use that as an interim tightening of the belt, as it were, anyway.
Okay. Because there's two attachments on the website, and you'll see it. I don't know if you do a search, on there. So I guess we'll put a hold on this until Dr. Jacobs looks at it. Some of the things that I did not see in the policy that I think is critical to add to the policy are the things about the dissolution, right? That I think is very important. I also think it's very important is the purpose, that we've, agreed on what the purpose will say, and that purpose is not in our policy. The idea, what Mr. Barefoot mentioned about being specific with regard to restricted funds, that's also not here because this policy is very generic. So some of the things I think we just need to do another crosswalk with it.
Dr. Jacobs, are you good?
Board Docs is not cooperating this moment.
Okay.
So I have it up, I just need to get to the attachments, and it is hard to find this policy. I looked before in the packet. So I will, as soon as I find it.
Because it hasn't been voted on, and so it's not part of our policies in here.
So while we're waiting,
It's just in a weird place.
Okay.
No, it's in public
gonna say,
hearing.
yeah.
It's not,
Right. It hasn't been finalized, so that's why it's not
Correct.
where the other ones are. Mr. Barefoot.
while we're waiting, a question or comment. Given the fact that this foundation has to meet in the sunshine, my prediction is that is going to present a major hurdle. I guarantee you, there is nobody that's willing to write a check that's going to have their name discussed in the public.
Well-
So I don't know how because other states don't have sunshine laws. I mean, I've been involved in this world for a long time. And the last thing that people, and I'll include myself in this, it's not for public discussion to have what I might do for the XYZ Foundation out in the public. We've got to come up, you've got to figure out how to get around this, because this is going to be a major roadblock, I guaranteed it. That's number one. And number two, I think that then this is where the marketing arms of, go ahead, excuse me.
The identity of donors and all information identifying donors and prospective donors are confidential and exempt from 1907.
Yeah, but if you're having a meeting in the sunshine, what does that mean? Does that mean that somebody can walk in, sit there and listen to the discussion? It's one thing to have them exempt from the minutes of the, you get the message. Just
Yes.
make sure that ultimately when this foundation begins to have meetings, that if you want to be dead on arrival, you start requiring individual names and strategies to approach so-and-so for such and such an initiative, you will not be successful. So I'll leave it to you guys to work out. And the other point, I think, and this is really for Dr. Moore and the team, this has really got to be carefully explained and rolled out to the community, because there will be not-for-profits who will be threatened by this. They won't understand it. They'll think that they're gonna disintermediate my list of potential donors or donors, on and on and on. So I think this can be a very sensitive issue. For all the good that's intended to do, it could have a bit of a chilling effect on certain not-for-profits. So, get your best marketing hats on and how we explain this in a way that it's really complementary and yet another source of how to best by kids. That's just I know you know that, but when this came up earlier in the year, or last year, whenever it was first, there's a couple of high-profile not-for-profits that actually are very supportive of the school district, wondering, are you getting into our business? So just be careful.
Ms. Knapp? Ms. Knapp, hold on.
Just for the chair, could not agree more. And Dr. Moore, Dr. Jacobs, and I have had conversations absolutely to be very deliberate about what we are here to achieve, and that we will certainly also ask that our school board has that consistent messaging, but absolutely in the first 100 days, we have got to get messaging right. And two, the reason we're starting this is also to certainly make sure there's alignment with the district and you have your own foundation, but the idea is that you are going to have donors that otherwise have not given to education, give to education. In Chicago, I would say at least half of our donors had never previously given to public education before. They did not have confidence in those dollars. We are starting this DSO with strong confidence in our school board and in our superintendent. So hopefully you will also have other people involved that otherwise hadn't given money before.
Dr. Jacobs?
So if you go to board docs where we have posted the policies, the first attachment, and you go into that first attachment, page 130 of 149 has the policy 9215, direct support organizations.
Okay, I know exactly what happened now. So the first, the other attachment has the chart, that colored chart. And so I went straight to that attachment with the colored chart, looking for 9215. In that attachment, it's not there. So now you're telling me it's in the other one.
It is there, I believe. I can look in that attachment as well to check, but just prior to this meeting, I looked in the attachment with the chart, and it just seems to be in a little bit of a different place than you would expect in that attachment, but I'll go check that one as well. But it is there.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, so it is there. So, now that it is there, it'll come back to us in December for a vote, and then we're going to revise it again?
Initially revise it at that point. I would allow Ms. Knupp and team to begin doing the work that they need to do. And as we bring the next book of policies, we typically bring policies twice a year. We'll evaluate, are the policies that we currently have in place, including that one, aligned to our current practice? And if not, make recommendations to change it.
Why don't we just do it right the first time? Why keep, I mean,
Mr. Barefoot?
With all due respect, twice a year, we got to get going on this thing. I wouldn't wait till whenever the next time is. As soon as it's ready to go, let's go. It doesn't need to be part of a book of several amended policies. Statutes change at the next legislative session where we'll have to tweak, I'm sure, some of our policies. But if this is ready to go, let's get it approved.
And through the chair, I believe the current policy as it is written allows us to begin that work, and it is in
Process, right?
fact correct.
Okay, great.
Okay, everybody's got to vote, so we can vote on whether or not we want to move it or not.
so I just wanted to clarify, so it's going to, I'm sorry, did you have something to say, Dr. Pasca? So so it's going to come to us for a vote, just clarifying, so it's going to come to us, this policy is going to come to us in December, after public hearing, and then I suppose the bylaws and the articles are going to come to us in January.
Through the chair, either December was my intent. If we can do them both in December, that would be best-case scenario, so we can begin doing that specific work. I think you all have provided a great deal of feedback, but I don't think, just in listening to the conversation, the recommendations that you all have provided isn't anything that we can't get correct and posted for December.
Correct.
Can we ask Mr. Ansbacher your recommendation on doing both of these on the same day, or approving the policy in December and then approving the articles and the bylaws in January?
I'd do them the other way around if you're
I
going to say.
really, as you know, typically we are relying on published policy, but I think candidly, forgive me for a legalism here, no harm, no foul in this case, because as long as the policy is adopted before, literally on the agenda, before the articles and bylaws, understand that the articles and bylaws are not going to be finalized until you all ultimately approve
Right.
the initial board members. So what you'll be approving initially is going to authorize Ms. Knupp to go and find those board members. And, or it can be done just as well. Either way, it's not going to be a legal and binding set of articles of incorporation until it actually has those officers and directors to slide in.
So we're going to have to do another vote anyway. So why not just do it in January?
I'll let the superintendent make that decision with the, he can bring it to us, and then we can always say, bring it to us in January. Ms. Knapp?
For the chair, I believe that you can start it with and also have asked you guys to approve the initial board at the same time. Again, I know you've been thinking about this for a long time and trying to get this started, so if there's a way to honor, obviously, the intent of all the school board, but to do both simultaneously and it falls within the good practice of, legality, it may be in our best interest too. I leave that just as a point for you to consider.
Okay. Mr. Barefoot?
Last point, I think we spent an hour and 45 minutes on this.
Yep.
The sooner we get this done and out of the quote-unquote public, the better. Many, if not most, of the people that would be interested in this, and by the way, I think you'll be surprised at the number of people that are paying attention, that have invested in public education in one way or another, and are paying attention now because of the political, the incorporation of politics into what, up to this point, had nothing to do with politics. It was all about education. It was nonpartisan. A lot of people are paying attention. And given the seasonality of a lot of our people, the sooner we get this out there so that we can start having conversations and we can consider who might be added to the board that would be, as Counselor said, you either give or get, the better. So
Thank you.
sooner the better.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. So
Dr.
we'll take this information back. Absolutely thank Janet and Sid for work putting this
Thank
piece
you.
Thank
together.
you.
This is a humongous amount of work and very thorough conversation. The next item on the agenda will be presented by Mr. Fagan. It's 2 items.
Through the chair to the board, 2 quick items. Annually, the charter schools have to provide audited financial statements for their prior year. So for 22-23, they had independent auditors. They get to pick them and choose them. They do an audit, they turn it into us, we review it, and it goes to the board for approval. All the financials are in good shape. You had some charter schools who made a little money last year. Some of them lost a little bit of money, but the end result is their fund balance is significant to do an ongoing operation. They have a very strong ending fund balance, and there was no major findings in the audit. Any questions?
Okay, board members, any questions? All right.
Second item is normal items, surplus property. There's approximately 22 items. Most of the items are dated in 83 and 92. They're obsolete and have no longer value to the district. We want to surplus those. Any questions?
No questions. Go ahead.
Mr. Bass, you're up.
Mr. Seymour.
Wait,
Or Mr. Seymour.
Oh, there is a question?
Or back to
yes.
Oh.
That was Mr. Fagan's last presentation at a workshop.
Yes, it was. Bittersweet. I was going to
Bittersweet.
say that, but
I will
Half
miss
a
everyone.
Smurf.
Most-
Aw.
all right. Don't make
Miss
us
everyone.
cry. Mr. Seymour.
Yes, ours is pretty simple. It's just the statewide mutual agreement that we have each and every year. It just focuses on the support that we would receive in the event of a disaster from FEMA. That's it.
Board members, any questions? I have one comment about that, and Mr. Fagan knows. It took us a long time to recoup FEMA funds from, gosh, what were they
So-
called? The double hurricanes that hit us, Jean and Francis.
Francis and Jean, 2004.
Yeah, it took forever to get those funds. Have we completed all that? It's all done?
Through the chair, for the most part, most all of those have been recuperated for what they would allow to be reimbursed for us.
Okay, so what's to prevent that from happening? I don't want to jinx us, but ever again. How can we put something in place to make sure that we jump on it as soon as we can?
Through the chair, normal process after a hurricane like that is probably going to be 12 to 24 months. But FEMA has also introduced some new processes where if you go through a certain kind of like training, they will agree to pay you, I think it's either 50 or 80% of your money sooner and faster than going through the entire audit process. So they know in the past that, people were waiting 2 and 3 years to get their money, which is detrimental to the district. So they've started some of their own improvements, and we've signed up for some of those, lack of a better word, courses to be qualified by them so that we can speed that process up.
So we're kind of doing it ahead of the game? then?
Yes.
Okay, and it wasn't just 12 or 24 months, it was years.
Well, we would get, it would trickle in. Certain things they would say, we're going to disobligate this because we don't have enough information. But they
Right.
say, okay, we have enough. Okay, you showed us enough pictures of trees down. We'll pay you to haul for those trees. But then they would constantly come back and ask for additional documentation.
So have we learned from what they asked us this last time, so we know what they're going to anticipate questioning us again?
Through the chair, and going back, I'm probably going to date myself here, with Hurricane Charlie, that
dating
would,
yourself.
you go Charlie, then Gene Francis, and then Wilma the year after that. Back then, we filed everything directly with FEMA. Now, the state has got the CERT team in place, which you work through them. Being in my other district, I know that that was very cumbersome and did not always go according to plan, because prior to Charlie, it had been several years before we had a big hurricane event like that. And then it seemed like we had that span of back to back to back to back. And then we went for a little bit. Now we've had some more. So as Mr. Fagan said, over time, the process has got better. So to see that long period of time waiting, I don't think we would see that again. But he is correct. 24 months is probably.
Okay, let's learn from that, jump
Expected.
on it, do whatever we can to forecast what they might ask us, because I don't want to wait years to be recouping funds again.
Just to brag on the team, I thought Mr. Bass was going to do it. They have those systems in place. They're out there before the company comes to pick up the debris. They're documenting it with pictures. It's a very comprehensive protocol that is in place. So whatever happened all those years ago, this team has really learned from it, and they're embedding those steps into the cleanup process. Just in case we're ever asked, we have those things in place.
Thank you.
I have two items here. The first one is the spot survey for the plant survey version 7. We approved that in June. However, now we're adding the Graves facility, and we have to have that updated DOE. We work with our local vendor, and DOE has approved it. Now we just need you guys to approve it. It will be on the December board meeting. Basically says that we're making an adjustment to our facilities list by adding the Graves facility.
Okay, any questions?
Just a thank you, Mr. Bass, and Graves family and Nick for getting everything rolling on this. Obviously, a lot of us were at the Wilson track, groundbreaking, looking at the community playground, but thank you for moving forward.
Yes, ma'am. And I mean, I'll give you just a quick update where we're at with everything. We've got the track graded, the sub base is graded. We're ready to put asphalt down, which will go down next week. You need 28 days for the asphalt to cure. So we're kind of be at a standstill with that, with the track portion of it. We've got all the lateral and main water lines prepped and ready to go. We're just ready to put the sprinkler and irrigation system in for the field area. Hopefully looking at sod going down probably the 1st of December. Kind of makes me a little concerned because of the growing period, but I think we'll have enough heat and keep enough water on it that we'll be able to get that to grow. The design of the concession stand, the restrooms, the press box bleachers, we're in the design phase of that. We're about 60% complete with that, working with Harvard Jolly.
Ms. Berenborg, also, I
Yes.
forgot to say a very big thank you to Mr. Barefoot to get this thing moving.
Yep, thank you. All right, sounds like everything's moving along.
Yes, ma'am. All right, so my next item is a salary increase of 4.5% for all non-bargaining employees for the 23-24 year. If approved, this will ensure that everyone for the 23-24 school year has got a salary increase. 4.5 reflects the same amount that CWA workers receive for this current school year. We've looked at our salary schedule, and we know we have some pockets of areas that we still need to work on to get increased, so we can be competitive with other districts. We keep hearing reports of, District A went up to this much for this group of workers. District B has gone to this. So we're going to be taking a look at that and hopefully coming back with something that will make us competitive, and we can not only keep our employees, but also make it attractive to come here.
Board members, any comment? All righty.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes the superintendent items. I believe there is a board member item.
Yes. Okay, so, and thank you for that attachment of adding that to this item. Hold on one second. Okay. So I asked for looking at a revision to the school board protocol because in the past, we had discussed 10 minutes, and then it went to not 8 minutes, and, no, I don't see it here, but I know I saw, oh, you sent it to us by email. When I opened it up, it reminded me that originally we brought up, let me find it. Is that it? Oh, thank you. Okay, so in our current language, it says during board business meetings, each school board member has a right to initially present on a discussion or action item up to 10 minutes. Following the initial presentation of the item, each board member may initially comment on the topic for up to 3 minutes. So what we have been doing, though, is 8 minutes, 8 minutes, 8 minutes, 8 minutes. I don't know where the 8 minutes
No, we
came in.
haven't.
I saw 8 minutes on the timer.
Maybe someone only spoke up to 8 minutes, but it's always been 10.
Okay. Well, I saw the timer and it was 8, that's why I brought it up. So I just want to bring this up and say, you know, we have this policy, let's stick to this policy. It's 10 minutes to present an item, which I think is fair because they do need 10 minutes sometimes to present an item. But then the 3 minutes doesn't, it allows for back and forth for board members instead of, you know, just listening one board member talk, and then another board member not getting a say. So I think that 3 minutes will keep us lively. I'd like to keep it as it is. I just want to point out that I looked over and saw 8 minutes a couple of times, and I thought, why are we doing that? Because I don't think that's in our policy. Plus, it's 10 minutes for the person that presents. It's 3 minutes for every conversation after that to keep it lively. The person can speak as many times as they want. But it's 3 minutes, 3 minutes, 3 minutes for each board member to be able to take turns. Any comments?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Dr. Jones.
When we worked on the board protocols for about 3 days, it was before Dr. Posca came, and it was hard work. Thank you, Dr. Jacobs, and I think we had a really good consensus. And we didn't put any kind of time limit on workshops, which I appreciate, because that is the time where we discuss and listen and give feedback, and as we know, good things come up during workshops. And I've done the presentations for 10 minutes, and I thought that was enough. As long as we have 3 minutes for board members to discuss. And it goes round robin until there's a call to end the discussion, or we have a vote, or there's more discussion. But I think as long as we, what's important in this protocol is that continuing in a round robin fashion until the discussion is complete, the board chairperson asks for a vote or a board member calls a question without interrupting another board member. As long as we can go back and forth on that, I think it's okay. And I think 10 minutes is okay to present, because you can still come back and you still have discussion.
Anyone else? Dr. Posca?
The initial item that you brought forward was to amend it and change it as discussed at the last meeting. And I guess the item is titled amended or revisions to the protocol. It sounds like now you're saying you don't want to change it.
Right. What I said is I'm going to recall it because she brought the item up. The point I was trying to make is that we weren't following the policy. I guess that's why I was talking about
No, I
that.
mean, last time you said you wanted to shorten it.
Right. I've decided this is fine.
Okay. Was there some sort of discussion that occurred in between you wanting to shorten it and
No,
now?
I thought about what people said at the last meeting.
Okay.
Anybody else?
My only concern is, I mean, if we're going to follow, I'm good with the 10 because that's what Robert's Rules says in the rules governing section. And debate is not discussion. So the 10-minute rule centers around having a debate on something that will come to us as a proposition. So in other words, you're voting on something. It's an action item that you're voting on, and that's where the time limits come, are addressed or are added, included within Robert's Rules, so that there is equal amount of time given for each person to debate the issue, to go back and forth and have, share your pros, your cons on whatever the issue is. The Roberts Rules, if you have your book, it starts on section 43. It does indicate that every member of the assembly has the right to speak to every debatable motion, and that typically there is 10 minutes provided for each speaker. What was mentioned is, well, that's for each speaker, but it doesn't actually say each response. And so my thing is, I'm great with the 10 minutes, but for 3 minutes as a 3-minute response, that's not fair and equitable. So you're giving more time to the person presenting the item, but less time for board members, for other board members to debate on the issue. And that's not equitable.
Are you saying I'm doing that?
No, we.
Oh, I was
We
gonna
are.
say, 'cause that's a
We're
policy we
only-
already
We're
agreed to.
giving the initial person 10 minutes and everybody else 3 minutes. That's not equitable.
Right.
It should be equitable. And if we're going to follow Robert's rules, it should be 10 minutes.
Yeah, I'm just going to remind you that Robert's rules are guidelines. They're not
I
law.
agree,
Okay.
100%. But I also don't think that 3 minutes is fair for you to respond to something that I just took 10 minutes on,
Okay.
or anybody.
Yeah.
Mr. Beerenberg?
Yeah, the reason why I brought it up is because I felt like we weren't following it, so I wanted to make sure that I brought this to your attention. I did feel like I wanted to amend it shorter, but I agree. 3 minutes, I think, is a good enough response for having a lively discussion. Dr. Jones?
Well, I understand taking the 10 minutes. If you're the one doing the presentation, I think you need 10 minutes. And as long as we still have the 3 minutes for each one and that we can continue to do that in round robin, I would be okay with that. I think the person who needs the most time is the one bringing it up. And I remember bringing up a couple policies, and you needed 10 minutes for sure. The workshop, obviously, you have as much as you need, and that's absolutely appropriate. You can listen and learn from that. But as long as it's still round robin and someone needs to add something new, I think it could still work. That's my opinion.
Yeah, the other point I want to make is, I get the call to question, but I agree with Robert's rules on the fact that everybody has a say.
Sure.
And we should not be calling the question without a board member having at least once or twice they can respond.
Absolutely.
Because I think that's only fair to your fellow board members. Okay, anything else? All right, then I would like to adjourn the workshop. The time is 2:42.